Okay, I'd like to call to order the Assembly Budget Finance Committee meeting. And let's go around the room and do industrial side myself.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson, Tim Staley.
John Weddleton. Bill Evans. Patrick Floyd.
Ellie Gray Jackson.
Dick Trainee.
Shirley Nelson, Budget Advisory.
Lance Wilbur, OMB.
Dan Moore, Treasury.
Mike Chadwick, Internal Audit.
Walter Burns, Deputy Assistant Manager.
And in the audience.
Assembly Council's office.
Thank you. Okay, MOA financial status. Robert and Dan, are you going to speak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. I'm going to just speak to the revenues, and then Lance, I think, has extensive information about the
Before you go on, Amy, are you online? Amy? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So for the city revenues, we've been providing reports about once a month. Our most current report is in draft status right now. We're going to provide it to the mayor's executive group on Monday. We did sort of run a preliminary report and briefed the mayor a couple days ago. So bottom line in terms of revenues for this year, when you compare our projection through the end of the year to what the budget has, it's about $4.2 million under budget, and under budget for revenues being we're in a shortage. And so the $4.2 million does include about $1 million of shortfall for the Development Services Department. So that's 1/4 of that. Another bigger piece to that would be with property taxes, both real and personal property. That's about a little over $1 million. So that explains half of the issue. The other half basically would be, if you were just to do the top three, would be the police department due to the cut to the PFD. It was $1.8 million is what we assumed, and we did get our first batch of PFD very recently, and that's obviously a very strong indicator of how much we'll get overall. And based on that, our $1.8 million estimate is what was like 99% there. So we see a slight positive $38,000 off of what we originally estimated. So it was very close. The major revenue sources that we have in terms of how they're tracking, room tax for this year is projected to be down about $1.2 million for general government. That's about 1.3% overall. I think I explained in the past the high level of the market, the higher end market, the bigger hotels with the higher prices, they've been losing some business to the middle market, and the middle market charging lower prices means we actually get less tax. So that's something that could be a continuing trend going forward. So that's room tax. Tobacco tax right now we're predicting to be $22.4 million, which is right on budget. This does have some signs that it could come in more positively by now in the end of the year, but that's, it's always month to month, so we don't know for sure. Auto registration tax is actually down a bit, and it's been down pretty steady this whole year. I think it's about 2 or 3%. That is a reflection of the economy being weaker with some job loss and income levels maybe being hurt by that. So that's happening. Marijuana tax, the budget was set at 0.7 or $700,000. We expect maybe $200,000 or $300,000 if these stores start opening and have a lot of activity in the beginning. But those numbers become so small from a budget standpoint, it's just not a major variance. MUSA MISA is another very big component. That one came in slightly above budget, so it's almost $22 million. And then on property taxes, real property we've known about for quite a while. That one had a variance of about, I think, $800,000. And then personal property came in within about $200,000 of what was budgeted. And so that's actually quite close, especially from personal property, which is harder to predict. The other departments are very stable and steady. Investment earnings, I'd say the two biggest potential movers between now and the end of the year are potentially tobacco tax. There could be some movement there, and then investment earnings. Investment earnings, we are about $800,000 above budget for the year, and that's for the cash pool investments. There is also some unrealized gain. It's about $600,000, but that's not something that it is built into the number I quoted, but it's not something that we say we can guarantee that by the end of the year we're going to continue to have $600,000 of unrealized gain. That changes month to month. In fact, it used to be $800,000, now it's $600,000. So, but that one could have some movement, and I think with the presidential election, everyone hypothesizes about what will happen after that, but the market surely will have some reaction once that election is done. The other accounts are really, the departments are doing a very good job overall with their budget. The parts of their budget they can control, they're doing actually quite well in meeting their revenue budgets. In Parks and Rec, even though it's not as big of a department, they're actually slightly above budget, which is a good sign too, and that's 2 years in a row they've been above budget, which shows that they're encouraging the use of their facilities. So that's the bottom line report. This actual report will get in the queue to come to you. I don't know your schedule off the top of my head, but it'll be probably the very first meeting in November.
November 1st.
November 1st? Okay, so we'll shoot for November 1st.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the report.
Thank you. I'd like to, for the record, to recognize that Mr. Domboski is on the phone.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Welcome.
I think Mr. Peterson asked this at a prior meeting, but could you remind me, so we passed that ordinance to facilitate the collection of Airbnb taxes.
Right.
Has that played out? Are we starting to get tax revenue that way?
We are starting to get reports of that. It started August 1st, and so technically all the people, whether they're big, small, whether they're Airbnb or not, they have to give us their filings by the end of October. So we're actually not to the deadline yet. We do. There wasn't a code change a number of years ago where we asked the 20 largest hotels to actually tell us on a monthly basis how they're doing with their revenues, to sort of informally report to us, so we don't have to wait so long to know. So that's why we can say with quite a bit of confidence where we think we're going to be with room tax. The Airbnb will have, I think it was $180,000 annualized effect, but since it only started in August, we're only going to have 2 months worth. So it's going to be very small, tens of thousands if we're lucky. So, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Trainee.
Tobacco, you were saying, is that going to be positive or negative?
Oh, I should have positive. We think there's more upside than downside.
So it's a 22 million. Is it going to? You think?
22.4 million is what's budgeted, and it could be hopefully maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars positive, but it really depends. These major distributors, they just make decisions on when they buy, and if they have a big order in December, great for us. If they shift it into January, it hurts us. So
Remember we started this. They were telling us we're going to go to the Valley to buy our tobacco, and they haven't done that.
No, they haven't. And it's a much more equalized world now, and with that big federal case, it's sent a strong message to the industry to not try to, evade the tax. So I think it's pretty stable. Really, what drives us now is the usage. So there is I think it's about 3% decline nationwide of tobacco usage, and we get a small increase for inflation. But because inflation's been so low, it's not offsetting the decrease in usage. So, but we factor that in when we give budget numbers to all of these.
On the hotel tax, you're saying we're getting less because they're using more medium range
more competitive
hotels.
pricing.
But aren't there more medium range ones out there now? So do we pick up on volume?
I think volume-wise, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think the volume is not an issue. I think there's still a strong number of people using the hotel rooms. It's just the average price has come down. So.
Because I know there's another one going into my area,
Yeah.
Tudor Road next to Lowe's
Mm-hmm.
office. There's a big one going in there, about 3 or 4 different rooms.
Yeah, and they're about the same. They're the mid-market thing. So it's it's good we have so many of them. It's just price-wise, the tax is based on the price, so it affects the tax.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Anything else, Mr. Moore?
That's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What did you say about the auto rental taxes? I don't believe I caught anything.
The auto. Okay, so you're talking about car rental.
Mhm.
Okay, that one is actually up for the year. It is a smaller tax. It generates about $6 million. And I think last I looked, it was about 7 or 8% up for the year. And that one is really a case of where the market feels they can really increase the prices, especially in the summertime. And so they keep going up with their price, and people need cars, and they keep renting them. So they're kind of in the driver's seat, no pun intended, with the pricing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Again, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Okay.
Mr. Roper?
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a pretty short report. On November 1st, you're going to get your quarterly budget to actuals reports, which will also include the utilities. For general government, we're 74.9% through the year in the report, and we're pretty much right on budget with both labor and our non-labor. Our non-labor is about 1% higher, and our non-labor is a little bit under. So we're right on track. As I mentioned last month, there were going to be some seasonal. We were under budget, and I mentioned there would be some seasonal adjustments, and those things have come in. So the departments are doing a very good job. We do have also in this report will be the one which you recognize, overtime and travel. We have 4 departments for a variety of reasons that are over in their overtime. The Assembly is one, primarily related to the elections. Finance, I think that has to do with a lot of their time related to the CAFR and SAP, OMB, just building the budget. And then public transportation, probably making some adjustments as it relates to available drivers. So those will be the key departments that you'll see that are significantly running hot on their overtime. And then for the utilities, they're pretty much all on track. And then, but again, a full report will be available to you. I was hoping that I would be able to give you an updated projections for year to date. We know where we are right now. I don't have that for you, but we will be able to provide that in our next report. And then my last point is just tomorrow we're going to start at 10 o'clock on our budget presentations. The draft is crafted. I'm looking at there for comments from the administration. We're going to start. And I think you should all have a schedule and a calendar. We're pretty booked. We're going to start with an overview by me, about 10 or so slides to sort of highlight some of the things that we talked about originally. We're going to go straight into police, fire, streets, transit, the municipal manager, all of those departments, then take a break. And then we'll go into some of the utilities. And again, the schedule is basically, it's a little different than we did last year, and it's primarily related to the executive manager's availability. Mr. Abbott is available this Friday, but he's not next Friday, so I wanted to make sure that I could get most of his departments. Mr. Harris is not available this Friday, but it is next, so part of the schedule you'll see in it so the executive managers could be there. I know the mayor has scheduled and met with many of you. You had questions. Mr. Starr had some questions about consolidated dispatch and a variety of other things. We're working on responding to those things. So hopefully we can have some of those responses to you at that meeting. And for those that we don't, we'll continue to work on those. And then we know that your first public hearing is the 25th. Then the first, we'll talk to the administration about how we would and when we would propose an S version. Right now we're thinking about after we hear from the public and members of the Assembly, the administration would propose an S version after that, and then make that available to you before your meeting on the 15th. So, or before actually your work session that you're tentatively scheduled for the 10th. So, Madam Chair, that's all that I have. We're working to get prepared for tomorrow.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And unfortunately, I had to schedule a little family vacation for next week, so we'll be there for the public hearing on Tuesday. But it's about how much headroom do we have in the administration's proposed budget? My understanding is we're pretty close, if not at, our cap.
So we built the budget to the cap. So there's no, it's budgeted to zero.
So in other words, if there are things we want to adjust, there's got to be an offset.
Yes. The other option is in the budget, we proposed using about $9 million of the remaining fund balance. And so if there are expenses, that would be an option too. You could reduce what we currently have proposed, or you could use more of fund balance or make some trades.
With that fund balance expenditure, would we still remain compliant with our
10 and 2? Yep. Yes, this is it's excessive undesignated fund balance or available fund balance. It's about $4 million.
we're still $4 million beyond the existing directive?
Yes.
I suppose.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee?
Getting back to hotel motel,
Yeah.
how are we respective of other towns our size as far as taxation on that? Or do we need to take a look at that whole area?
We did look into this recently. It's, the average is 13.5%, we're at 12%. So there is room to go up.
Can you give me an analysis on exactly how much money we're talking about?
If we went to, from 12 to 14%, it would be $4 million.
12 to 14%, is 12, is how much?
$4 million.
Thank you.
And we looked at it recently, that's the only reason I asked.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Wellington?
Just backing up a bit, you were using terms, I don't know, maybe 10 to 2, something. Could you explain? Answer his questions for me.
Okay, so, Mr. Weddleton, we have a fund balance policy that, based on the amount of expenditures in 1 year, we are required to have set aside 10% plus 2% for capital, for a total of at least 12% fund balance. Anything more than that is considered undesignated. And that is, Mr. Flynn was asking, is this $4 million above our requirements to keep that 12% set aside? The answer is
Just
yes.
to be clear, the requirement is something we set in code, and it is something that the bond rating agencies use when they evaluate the quality of the debt. The government actually has to have those dollars there. It's a darn good idea to have.
If I can follow up on your comment right now, I don't think it's code, I think it's a resolution, I think it's policy. The set-asides, I've got a copy of the resolution,
You better
but I don't think it's code, but anyway,
Doesn't matter.
anyway,
Point's a point.
yeah, but I just wanted to clarify. There's nobody else out
I
here.
had one other,
Mr.
just to
Laura.
Mr. Trainee. That question you asked on the room tax, it would be $4 million. Right now, the way the room tax is used, it's split about 1/3 with general government, the civic ventures, and which is the convention center, and then Visit Anchorage. So if there were any thoughts in the future, you would have to decide, do you want that $4 million, if it was a 2% increase, to be equally shared the way it is now, or just kept by general
We can
government?
adjust that.
It's your choice. You know, that is written into code. So
Now, is that required to go to the voters, or is it
Yeah,
as a
it
warrant
has to
so
go
that
to
we can
voters.
just do
When
it?
they did the convention center, it went to the voters. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was actually outside the tax cap also, and it always has been. Room tax always been outside the tax cap.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Moore. I'd like to recognize that the mayor and the chief of staff has joined us. Okay, I just have one comment to make. The department directors are going to be doing their presentations, right?
Yes.
And I'm really, really happy about that because years ago, the department directors used to do their presentations and it worked really, really well. We got the opportunity to ask questions face to face with those who are running departments, and then that went away. But it's back now, and I'm really glad that you get to see the budget process at this level. So thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Nelson, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think as some of you had seen, the Budget Commission had asked for the calculation of spending limitation, and so that's been on our docket for a couple months, and we did just receive some of that information. And I think as a communication has shown, thank you very much for giving us more time. So we met this morning with Lance to get more information, and I think we're getting a better handle on it and seeing if possibly we can be making a recommendation. And I'm not sure we'd make it the 1st. I might have to ask you for the 15th and so on, if you don't mind. But I will meet back with our commission, which would be on the first Wednesday of the month. So it's not on the 1st, if that works. But Marilyn had some really good suggestions and good information. I mean, just on trying to get a better understanding of what the objective is of each of them and so on. So we have a better handle on that.
Thank you, Mr. Are you?
Oh, well, this part, yeah. Did you have a question?
In a sense, so we have something we introduced to change that spending cap limit.
Correct. AO 130.
And you're looking at possible changes to that, or is that what you're?
Well, this started, the Budget Advisory Commission asked from the administration to get information on the last 10 years of calculation of spending limitation. We wanted to just see those. And so this was a few months ago, and we just received the information at this last meeting, which was the first Wednesday of October. No, second Wednesday, we were late. And so on, and then this AO 130 has been introduced. And so we asked as a commission if we could have a little more time to dig into the information as to why all of a sudden, now we have a new amendment and so on. So this morning we met with Lance to gather more information on it. And we're digging into, the municipal attorney met with us and explained the history and so on. So that's where that stands. It's been enlightening, and I know it's been confusing because they were conflicting with each other at some point with the spending limitation versus the tax cap, and it's beyond my total understanding, but I think I understand the gist of it. And, we want to get a better grasp on what is it supposed to be doing. If we can answer that, the spending limitation, and the limitations of its uses. And that's tended to be a problem and so on, because if you have this calculation, the spending limitation, it wasn't designating the spending aspect of it and so on. So we're just still educating ourselves on why, we don't necessarily are not recommending that it gets changed at the moment. Maybe we need to learn a little bit more about it, and maybe we could fine tune a few things, because I just look at it maybe as a little balanced and checked too and stuff. But anyway, that's where we're at. And so we did have a very informative meeting. And at our next meeting, which will be the first Wednesday in November, Dr. Dina Paremo will be our key speaker. So I open that up to you if you're interested. She's going to be coming and talking about the school budget. And I think it would be, you might want to come and visit and stuff, because everything I've talked with her, she's very on top of it and stuff. So she will be our guest speaker, and she has an associate that will also be attending the meeting as far as the business side of the budget.
Mr. Wilson?
Pardon?
First Wednesday.
November
First,
2nd.
is it November 2nd? The first Wednesday of the month. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wilson?
So I think we heard that the spending limit might put a cap on this year's budget. That's sort of you saying, is that correct? So if there's a delay in changing that ordinance or doing something, is that going to make big changes in the budget we're looking at?
Not right now, no.
No.
When could that be?
I think the whole issue about the AO 130 is the inconsistency between, as Ms. Nelson mentioned, the inconsistency between the application of the tax cap, which is how we built the budget, and the application of the spending limit, which we're in a situation where the population and the CPI are down. And so that's causing the mix-up. And so the question is, as it relates to AO 130, is to sort of square those things away so that we build our budget based on the tax cap, and in the event the tax cap goes away, then the spending limit would stand. So that's the primary purpose of that AO.
But if we don't do AO 130, then that spending cap puts some limits and lowers our budget, correct?
Well, right now, if the ingredients of the spending limit were applied, we are over the spending limit based on the proposed budget, but we are within the tax cap,
So how much over the spending limit?
about $9 million.
9 million. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And just a comment, okay, on the ordinance. We had a work session on that ordinance, and I think you were there, Mr.
So I was
Wilson.
trying to refresh.
Yeah,
didn't
and
know
I
it was delayed.
understand. Yeah, and we did have a work session on it, and I've been around for a long time, and I to tell you the truth, never really understood the two, and and neither did several administrations, because it was not, as it was mentioned in the work session, there were many occasions when it was not, I don't know what word to use, but it was overlooked.
It was massaged.
I'll use that. I'll use that for overlooked. But anyway, I'm sure we'll have more discussions on it. The next item on the agenda is the SAP progress report. Mr. Stern, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Before I begin here, it's been a couple of months since I've actually given the report, so I'm going to kind of just talk about some of the status of the current project before we dive into the details of what the report shows. In addition to that, we'll try to highlight a few areas in advance of Zig's report next week so that you have a little bit of a perspective of where we're at. When I was here last month for Zig's presentation, we were just about ready to take a look at our schedule, and there were some items that were of concern to us that we were going through. So What ended up happening over the last 3 weeks is we took a look at our schedule, which currently had us going into our first testing phase, first part of November. We had some challenges that we were facing on the FILO side, which is the finance and logistics side of the equation, as well as the development side, which is developing all the objects that we have to prepare for testing. And we're behind in both those areas. So as a consensus about the administration as well as SAP, it was decided that we would add an additional 3 weeks onto our development phase rather than go into the testing phase without some of those objects not being ready and fully tested. So and I'll go into the details of what that means, but the project plan itself as well as the schedule have been changed in this document to reflect that additional 3 weeks. If you remember, we had 6 weeks at the very end of the project between when the project was going to be finished and our targeted go-live date of July 1st. So now that 6-week gap or buffer is now, because of adding these 3 weeks, it's now down to 3 weeks. So we still have time to meet our July 1st. That's not being impacted, but we did need to have 3 extra weeks. So rather than beginning our first phase of testing on roughly November 1st, we're now going to begin on November 28th, which is the week after Thanksgiving. Everything else is still following at that course of action, but what we felt is that would give our FILO group 3 more weeks to be able to get their work done, as well as to have the developed objects, which are mainly being developed by offshore resources, the opportunity to get more of those things developed so that we're one in our first round of testing, that we would have a better system to be able to test and have less errors or fixes that we needed to do. So that's a big change. The date that we were targeting, which was May 5th, is now towards the end of May, and that's reflected in here. We still need our July 1st date, but everything has been modified and changed and looked at based upon that major change. So I didn't know if there was any questions before I dive into it, but I wanted to get that particular piece of information out there and let everybody aware that everything that we're showing here has incorporated that 3-week delay into our testing.
I don't see any.
Okay. So with that being said, we start going through the process here, and we're doing really well on our HR side. They were going to be scheduled to go on time, so they're actually able to do even more testing in advance to make sure that side of it is going to be doing well. As you can see, most of our phases in here in this report, when it was prepared, are either green or yellow. And everyone is really comfortable by having those extra 3 weeks. The one area, however, and this is kind of something of an advance notice before next week, that we are struggling a little bit, and we've mentioned our 2 key areas of concern have been interfaces and data. Interfaces we're doing very well on. The Assembly approved on Tuesday an extension for a portion of our interface thing. But interface development, we're looking really strong, and we're really happy that we're going to be able to be on time there. However, in data, which is the migrating the data from PeopleSoft and all of our Excel spreadsheets into the SAP system. We're having some challenges there, so that's actually going to be going red, and we're red yesterday. So the report that I'm sure Zig will be showing next week will be red. The advance on that discussion on that is we are challenged by the requirements that we have to have. I've got a little bit of a late start on it as well. We're doing whatever we can to mitigate and ensure that we try to rectify that situation. But rest assured, the municipal staff, I can assure you, is working their tails off to be able to try and not only meet the data file requirements, but also make sure that the data is good and cleansed. But there's a lot of work there. Data is really important going into our testing, because we're not only testing the functionality of the system, we're looking for the right answer. So you have to have the right data going in to be able to get the answer. But it is an area where we're struggling right now, and you'll probably see it in Zig's report next week showing up as a red category. In all of the other areas, based upon the fact that we have the 3-week extension, we're looking real good at meeting our timelines and our deadlines to be able to enter into the testing, the first phase of testing, in a strong position.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 1.3.2.1 on the second page, MOA HCM realization project, you have it as green and 76% complete, but it's supposed to be finished tomorrow. So can you explain to me why it's green? Are we going to do 24% of that project in the next 24 hours?
So the project's original target date for that group was tomorrow, before the extension took place. So they haven't changed the dates to ensure that the tasks that are expected to be done by tomorrow, we have another slide later on here that shows whether we're late on it. We don't modify the original dates just because of the change that has happened in the process. Because what we want to be able to show is if we're really behind on something, it's behind because of the original date. If we kept extending the date out there, we'd never look like we were behind, and we'd never look like we had a problem. So that's why the date still shows the original targeted date when that was our original date there, without the additional extension that was on.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Please continue.
Okay. So, you can certainly read this, but we're feeling very strong, like I said, in HCM, and final with the 3 additional weeks as well as development. We're going to come in. They're putting additional resources on offshore to, we've done at least 40 additional staffing offshore to help with the development over the last month. So they're actually starting to deliver a little bit early on some of those resources. So the project's going very well. ECM, which I know is important to the Assembly because that was the content management side of it, we're actually going to begin configuring on Monday. So we've done all the blueprinting, and they're going to actually start on those 3 departments on Monday. So that's one stream that we're doing very well on, and we're certainly coming down the stretch on what we need to be able to test on that. Then I want to kind of go into the financial status here because that always comes up. That's on the page. That real little chart on the bottom there. In his report, he always brings up with regards to uni staffing. The uni staffing is still the same number. We will be looking at the 3rd quarter charges here with the executive steering committee hopefully in the next week or so. And then they'll make a decision about to go ahead and actually book the 3rd quarter charges for that. Lance is leading up that particular effort. So while that number is still there, we are working on it and would expect that number to change certainly by the time we report next month with the current up-to-date information on there. But that is something I know he highlights. In addition, there's always a comment about the consulting charges not going up at the rate, and we still have not paid any SAP invoices. So that while the work is continuing, we haven't actually processed any of those. It is starting to become a situation where SAP is raising that, and we will have to work through that here, in the near future. But the numbers themselves haven't gone up. There hasn't been any charges for late charges or anything like that. As I mentioned multiple times, the invoices are always wrong. So we continually have to get them to change them and make them accurate. And in addition to that, the administrative staff that reports to me is completely changed, and that new group started last week. So there's a little bit of an uptick in trying to get them caught up to speed on it. But there is a desire on SAP to start pushing through some of the larger invoices, if at all possible. And so they are looking at those. And then once we've looked through those, they still have to go back to SAP to be corrected before we can actually think about processing.
Mr. Training?
How much are we talking about?
We're running about $1 million a month on consulting and probably about $200,000 a month on travel. So you're probably up in the words of $6 million, $6.5 million, given that we started April 11th with SAP. The other vendors that we have, Peloton, Alaska IT, Elite, are all current. We've been paying those and processing those. What we're really referring to are the ones that are not being paid, which is the bulk,
SAP.
is the SAP ones.
And if I can follow up, just to refresh everybody's memory, the contract with SAP is $20 million, and we already approved that contract. So that's not additional money that he's referring to. Thank you. Please continue.
Paying the bills on the original.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to go back to something you said just a couple of minutes ago, you said we'd move some of the work offshore. Are you talking like India or?
So yes, Mr. Peterson, in the original contract, in order to bring the number in at the 21 million, of which 17 of that was consulting work, in that original proposal by SAP was approximately 53% of the work, or the dollar amount, was going to be offshore development work because the hourly rate is substantially less than onshore. So yes, right now we're actually using 4 countries, I believe. I believe it's India, Germany, Argentina, and Venezuela currently all have offshore resources that are developing different objects for this particular endeavor. And they really ramped those up over the last month, one, because the volume of work caught them off guard a little bit and the timeline to get it done. So they are bringing those resources on sooner than they thought they were going to spread out. Now they're trying to get to meet the development time period that we had. And they were certainly one of the 2 items that needed those extra 3 weeks.
Great, thank
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Please continue.
So then, if we can go on to the second to last page there, we have the new schedule, which does have the targeted dates that are there. Just a couple of reminders, with this 3-week extension, it did not impact our 3 weeks of holiday break that we've shut down, which will be no uni labor and no consulting labor will be allowed to bill for that. That's the Thanksgiving week and then the 2 weeks around the Christmas, New Year's holiday. This change did not stop that impact at all, and they're still built in there. And as just a couple other items, so now the current go-live date is May 29th rather than the May 5th date that was used for quite a while. We would still, as I mentioned, are targeting July 1st. However, I'll remind everyone that even though it's our targeted date, we have to start 2 weeks before that with a system ready to go because the payroll has to start gathering all their data and their punches to be able to hit that. So the system technically has to be ready to go 2 weeks in advance of our go-live date, even though we have to be ready. We just would not give them access to begin except for the payroll department to be able to start. So we still have a 3-week gap at the end. We still need to figure out what that gap is and how we're going to deal with it, but it has shrunk from the 6 weeks that we had to begin with. We've got the schedule status there and how we're doing. And then I guess I just want to refer to the last page there. We have quite a bit of late tasks that I want to speak to. And the majority of that is on interfaces. And you've heard me say interfaces we're in pretty good shape on. We're actually having one interface with one department that is substantially complete, and that is what leads to a large number of remember, these are all individual tasks, so there might be 400 tasks with one interface, and if one's behind, it has a significant impact on that. The municipal manager is dealing with that department and trying to expedite that one interface, so we're hoping that will pick up here pretty soon.
Mr. Trainee?
Which department?
The fire department's interface is the one that we're behind on. We have 70-some interfaces that are currently going, and we're actually, from where I was concerned about them several months ago, we're looking pretty good. We've had some that are out of our control, like we've mentioned in the past. The state changed their retirement reporting. That's caught us off guard. Some of these things are outside of our control. We will be late on them just because we have to start over from scratch, but we're working on them. Life insurance is another example where they went with a different vendor. We have to start those over from scratch. So with that being said, the core ones that we're worried about, the telestaffs, the Maximos, the power plan, team budget, those kind of ones, we're feeling really confident where we're at. Those are critical ones for testing, that the first round of testing, that we're going to be in good shape to have those ready to be done during those testing. And these other third-party ones we'll get in the second and third testing when we need to. We're relatively confident on that. Just a couple other items here to mention. I know you always ask me, is there anything to be expecting on the horizon from the assembly perspective that you should be aware of? You just did you did the ALM licenses and the third-party interfaces last Tuesday. The only thing that I can see currently on the horizon is there might be some coming forward again where we need the upper spending limit on one of the two of the vendors as we're moving hours around and vendors around, and we have some gaps. The mayor is aggressively working on our gaps with SAP leadership, and we're going to be working on those over the next few weeks or months, but there could be a situation where we might not have enough spending authority, for example, on Peloton, where we might need a little bit more to do that. But that's the only thing I can see currently on the horizon that we would be requesting from the Assembly, and I'm hoping we're probably still a few months away from that being finalized. But That's kind of where we're looking at right now, when we have to reallocate what was initially planned to what we're actually doing, that causes that adjustment that we have to have. So we're looking at that, but I don't see the spending authority on some of those individual contracts being enough with how we're reallocating the workload, and we might have to come back and get those adjusted at some point in time.
Thank you. Anything else?
That is everything.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other comments. Audience, anybody in the audience have anything to say or ask? Okay, well, with that said, our next committee meeting is the Rules Committee meeting. It starts at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
We'll talk about the Terry Jim audit.